We're talking right now with a political economist from UVA, Syaru Shirley Lin, and we're going to move on now to a discussion of identity and how changes in the way people identify here in Taiwan may be having an impact on this year's election. Now, I want to show you another slide here. Let's put up the slide on identity. So basically what this does is it charts the changes in the way that people of Taiwan identify from 1992 on the left to June of 2019 on the right. And this is from the Election Study Center at NCCU. Now, in 1992, you can see that 46% of people in Taiwan identified as both Taiwanese and Chinese. And then in second place there, 25.5% identified only as Chinese. And then down in third place, 17.6% identified as just Taiwanese. Now that green line there, you can see from 1992, you can trace it all the way up to last June, and it's now the number one way in which people here in Taiwan identify. 56.9% identify as Taiwanese, followed by both Taiwanese and Chinese, and then just Chinese. Only 3.6% of people in Taiwan identify only as Chinese. Now, Shirley, I'd like to ask you, what is the connection between the way people identify and the way they vote?
Yes, I am very focused on national identity as a factor in terms of economic policy. And for Taiwan, this is very integral to the discussion. But identity really, there's two things in Taiwan's actually case. One is support for unification is as important as what we call self-identification. The chart you just show is called self-identification, which is like what you fill out for a college application. You know, are you Asian? What if you're half Asian? Would you fill out you're Asian or you're not? And I think that self-identification means something, but it also depends on the viewers, what they hear from the question. But it's no secret that Taiwanese, especially young people, have increasingly not identified themselves as Chinese. For over 10 years now, you see those who identify themselves as only Chinese has dropped from 25% at the beginning of the poll to 4% for a decade. However, actually in 1989, before official polls began, United Daily News had done a poll, and over 52% of Taiwanese said they were only Chinese, nothing but Chinese. Now, in terms of identity literature, this is quite unusual for a community to decide in 30 years that they want to be something different. So Taiwan has actually really bred a new generation of young people who say their identity is civic identity. They are culturally Chinese, but they believe in values that are uniquely Taiwanese. Pluralism, democracy, freedom of speech, press, and assembly. And they want to say, I'm Taiwanese in these polls. So young people polls are something that you could look at. There are many, many. One of the things that Taiwan as a free place has is lots of polls. And that's very important, just like unification. Now we have the most current unification poll, those who support immediate unification is less than 2%. For me, that's part of political identity, which is part of identity in general. And for Beijing, this is the report card. Looking at the identity number every day, they feel this is, if they are finding their propaganda or, let's say, soft and hard power effective on the issue of unification.
Well, they're failing their report card, right?
They have, over the years, already known that. And the question is, when you are, it's like many of us doing things. When you do it for a very long time and you've been doing it the same way, it's very hard to say, well, I'm going to fundamentally change my strategy, because what is the alternative? And of course, Beijing has many other issues that they want to deal with. And Hong Kong has also seen an identity change among young people since 2008 to now. And young people identifying themselves as Hong Konger is now higher than ever before in a similar fashion, except so accelerated. Taiwan took 30 years, and Hong Kong really has just changed in the last decade.
Do you think what's happening in Hong Kong is affecting the way China wants to deal with Taiwan as well?
It should, but we haven't seen, actually.
Right. We don't know exactly what's going in their mind, but
Yes.
And what about the national identity? Do you think this is a big reason for Thai support here at the polls?
Yes, of course. I think for young people supporting Thai, as I said before, whether it's young people or older people, I think older people are more ideological. So they support the KMT or DPP based on historically what those parties have been associated with. But for younger people, it's not pro-independence or pro-unification. Young people want to be Taiwanese, want to be proud of being Taiwanese, want to be participating internationally. They want to go work for the World Bank, for example. They don't want to come from a place that's not a country, not a state, a nothing place, a pariah internationally. But at the same time, they want to be like any other American student that I teach at University of Virginia. They want to work in Shanghai, in Beijing, and they don't want to be singled out and be penalized for whom they vote for. So for young people, that is very important that their identity comes first, which is actually what my last book is about. The identity is the lens through which we see the world. You can't, there's no trade-off. On that basis, you decide how to move forward in determining what's an economic interest. And I think for young people, therefore, it's very hard to imagine voting for a party that says we don't mind getting closer to China, even if it means diluting some of Taiwanese values.
So do you think that this growing national Taiwanese identity is good for Taiwan?
I think good or bad is one of the ways that Chinese scholars would talk about this. It's not a normative question. We don't have a choice. It's a bottom-up in a democracy. The people think what they think. And we can't tell them it's not good for you. So you better think differently. People feel, and this is what happened to Trump. People felt the way they felt and they voted the way they voted. But I am not making an analogy at all that Tsai is Trump. Most people will say Han is Trump-like. I think those analogies are not really relevant to Taiwan. But most importantly, identity is what you think you are and what values really define you. And it's not really important in terms of telling people you're wrong. And that's the problem with the world.
So it's impossible for an outside force to kind of change the way people identify with how they identify themselves. What's more interesting is to look at how certain candidates can tap into certain ways in which people identify.
Well, I would say the KMT had tried for 70 years, I would say for 5 decades, tried to change people's identity in Taiwan. The KMT told everybody in Taiwan they are Chinese, nothing but Chinese. It worked, but it took no time to snap out of that. So I think that top-down identity formation is another topic that scholars like us look at, and sociologists, political scientists all have different views. But I think that this is precisely the issue. Beijing believes that everything is top-down. So oftentimes when you talk about this issue of identity, Taiwanese identity growing, consolidating, the Chinese scholar think it's all textbook-based. Somebody was trying to create this, like Chen Shui-bian. And others realize that it's bottom up. It's both.